Hi guys, I'm Steve Brown here in the famous Alpine Beat Laboratory, and today we're going to talk to you about Perfect Fit. Now, as you guys know, Alpine recently introduced the 8-inch screen. This is a full big screen for your car with an 8-inch WVGA screen that's unlike anything that's currently on the market. Now, as you guys probably already know, we also make a Perfect Fit system that allows this radio to be mounted in a variety of different vehicles. But what if you don't have one of those vehicles? Well, we've also designed what we call the UTB. This is what we call the universal trim bezel, and the idea of this is it actually mounts and allows you to install the 8-inch radio in more vehicles with a little bit of custom work. So what you're going to need is a dash kit. In this particular vehicle, this is a 2006 Range Rover, we have a dash kit that's designed to mount a 7-inch screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify this and integrate the UTB into this bezel to make a nice looking Perfect Fit system for this Range Rover. So in this particular kit, as you can see, there's a pretty good sized gap on the bottom and top, which is actually a good thing in our situation because we need a little bit more room to fit this radio in. Now, when we place the trim bezel over the top, you'll notice that the trim bezel will take up this gap on the top and on the bottom. All we're gonna have to do is trim the top and bottom of this edge. And as you can see, the way this thing's designed, it's got extra plastic around the edges, so you can cut that off if you don't need it. In this case, we'll probably leave the side plastic and trim the top and bottom. So what I'm gonna do now is place this thing on the kit, and then I'm gonna scribe it where we need to actually cut the kit. So what we're gonna do is trim essentially the sides off this kit and just use the left and right sides, and then glue it back together using CA glue to attach it, and we should be on our way to making a Perfect Fit kit. So now we've cut our top and bottom edges off, so I'm going to take a little bit of a grinder to this and trim it down to get it flat, and then we can place it back in the car. One thing that's really important during this step is to go slow, because if you go too fast, you can actually melt these really thin edges and it'll warp the piece. So just take your time when you're grinding it. I usually like to use a 50 grit disc. This can also be done with a block, but it takes a little bit longer. So if you're going to use an air tool, just take your time. So now we're going to glue the UTB into the existing dash kit that we've already bolted in place. To do that, one of my favorite substances on earth. This is super glue. We get this at hobby shops, and the key is to get one that's fairly thick. That way it won't run and go places you don't want it to go. So to start this off, we're going to tack this piece onto our existing dash bezel. And then once we get it on there, we're actually going to use a little zip kicker to quick cure it. So the first thing we're going to do on this piece to both reinforce it and to trim it is to cut a piece of 1/8" ABS plastic to go along the entire bottom edge. What that's going to do is it's going to fit it to this HVAC panel, and also it'll allow us to fill the gap that's on both sides of this, and it'll strengthen the piece at the same time, since we really don't have a lot of edge here, since this radio really takes up the entire dash on this Range Rover. Now remember, in the beginning of our tutorial, we talked about using thick glue. You're about to see why. The beauty of using thick super glue is it'll fill these small gaps, and it's nice and strong, so you don't have to worry about using body filler. Notice how it fills all that up. Hit it with a little bit of zip kicker. Now it's starting to be molded together. So now, as you can see, we're taking our grinder and we're grinding off all the excess plastic and glue that we don't need. So we're going to trim this bottom edge off, and I'm rounding this a little bit as well, just to blend it into the dash, and again, require less filler to be used. All right, so we're back in the car, and as you can see, we've actually mounted our 8-inch radio to the dash kit. And the way we did that, in this case, we actually used some brackets that we had. Now, a lot of times you can use brackets out of a standard double din dash kit because they'll come with side brackets. So using a bracket like that with some ABS plastic that's then CA glued onto the piece itself. So you can see now we've got a nice strong mount. It allows a radio to easily bolt in and out. And now we'll check it for fit. And as you can see, we've also taped up the top and bottom bezels, because what we're going to do next is actually apply some body filler to this thing. Now, the best way to do this in this case is going to be in the car, because we actually want to fit to this top edge And if we do it in the car, we'll be able to do it in one step, sand it down, and then we'll be ready for primer. So we're back in the car now. As you can see, we've got our kit mounted in the dash. We've got the radio in the kit as well, just to help locate everything properly. And you can see we've got tape around the areas where we don't want body filler. And now we've mixed up a little bit of body filler, and we're just gonna go around the edges, and we're gonna seam everything in. And as you can see, we're gonna fill this gap on the top as well so that it fits really nice into the shape of the dash. So now you can see we pulled our piece out. The filler is cured, and this is actually the filler that we're using, by the way. Premium filler, so it's a nice and thin. It's easy to work with and really easy to sand too, and that's the key. Now, the most important thing about sanding this is this top edge, because as you can see, we've actually added a little bit of filler on the top to fill the gap that we had. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take the grinder and really carefully grind right up against that edge. That'll give us a line so that when we're sanding, we know exactly where to go to. And once we're done, it should fit right back in the car without any problem. So here we go. So now that we've got the top edge pretty close, we're gonna use our Air DA sander to sand the sides where the majority of the filler is. Now you can also do this by hand. It does take a little bit longer. I usually like to start with the DA first to get the majority of it knocked off and then finish it up by hand to get it right where I want it to be. All right, now we've got our piece all sanded down. It looks good, so we're gonna test fit it in the car, check the fit. As you can see now, we don't have a gap anymore across the top. It looks nice, the sides fit well. I think we're ready for primer. All right, so we're here in the paint shop, and there's a couple different ways you can prep and paint this thing. What we're gonna do is use what we call poly primer. This is a high build catalyzed primer, so it actually uses fiberglass hardener that mixes with it. And this stuff works great because it's really thick and it builds a nice coat on the surface that is really easy to sand. It only takes about an hour to dry. You can also use an aerosol high build type primer as well if you don't have access to a paint booth. It does take longer to dry, and a lot of times you will need 2 coats. So we're gonna go ahead and spray this piece. We're gonna do 3 wet coats of the polyester primer. All right, so now the primer's dry, so you can see we've already started sanding the piece down. Now there's a couple ways to do this. I prefer using a little Air DA like this. If you don't have one of these, you definitely want to get one. These things are really, really handy. I'm using a 320 grit disc on it, but you can also do this by hand, and it's especially easy on a smaller piece like this that really doesn't have a lot of surface area. So we're gonna sand this down with 320, and then we'll be ready to paint. All right, so we're back in the paint booth. We've got our piece sanded down and ready to paint. Now, again, with the paint process, there's a couple different ways you can go. The most common way is to use SEM. SEM is a great plastic paint, and it comes in a variety of different colors that match most any interior. Now, what we're trying to match is this piece. This is the factory gray, and as you can see, it's gray and it's got a little bit of a lighter color on top of it. So we're gonna shoot it first with the darker and then do a really light dusting with this, this lighter silver to give it the right effect. Now, what's also really important is to make sure the surface is clean, and that's why we use this prep all stuff. We spray this on, wipe it off, and that gets all the dust and dirt off the panel. So we're ready to go. Now with this, you really want to just do some light coats. You don't want to put too heavy of a coat on, because in addition to building on the color, you're also kind of building a little bit of a texture into the panel, kind of like the factory look. So we're just going to give it several really light coats. Try to come at it from different angles to get the overall effect right. This will take several different coats. So we'll put on a light coat first, let it sit for a little while, and then we'll spray on some more. This paint dries extremely fast. So usually a couple minutes, it's all it's gonna take for this stuff to be ready to go back in the car. All right, so it's all done. We've got the radio back in place. We've got it all wired up, and that's how we make a perfect fit kit out of the UTV trim bezel.
Driving mobile media solutions. Alpine.